and the kind of cynical racial demagoguery that we have seen around this bill, while ignoring the substance of it. And I will point out the media has been eager to ignore the substance of it. The media says, should we protect the right to vote? Yes, we should protect the right to vote. This bill takes away your right to vote. This bill is designed to prevent the voters from choosing to throw the bums out. The most fundamental right of any voter to throw the bums out, whether they're one side or the other side. We, the people, have sovereignty. And this bill, the Corrupt Politicians Act, was designed to take that power from the people and give it to the politicians in Washington. So today was a victory. It was a victory for the American people. It was a victory for democracy. It was a victory for the Constitution, and it was a victory for the rule of law. I yield the floor.
Madam President.
The Senator from New York.
I rise today for the 13th time to call for every senator to have the opportunity to vote on a common sense, bipartisan bill, the Military Justice Improvement and Increasing Prevention Act. This bill would ensure that members of our military would get the justice and the justice system that their sacrifices deserve. We do not have time to delay. I've begun calling for a floor vote on this bill since May 24th. That's 29 days ago. Since then, it's estimated that 1,624 service members will have been raped or sexually assaulted. More will have been victims of other serious crimes, and many of them will feel that there's no point in even reporting the crime because they have no faith in the current military justice system. That's because right now, if a service member reports a crime, the case and their fate will be put into a commander's hand. This bill argues instead that our service members who are victims of serious crimes or who are accused of serious crimes should have those cases reviewed by an impartial, trained military prosecutor. And it does not say that commanders are removed from their responsibility with regard to the military justice system. It doesn't say that commanders are relieved of the responsibility of ensuring good order and discipline. Under this bill, commanders will still have the full array of tools to implement good order and discipline: counseling, restriction, confinement, protective orders, rank reduction, non-judicial punishment, summary court-martial, and even special court-martial. None of these change under the law. In addition, under today's system, only 3% of commanders have the right to do convening authority for general court-martials. So the truth is is that a small number of commanders will be even affected by this legislation. But I can promise you, the view from the service members will be significant, because they will now see that if there are someone who has been assaulted or harassed or had any justice need, that the person reviewing the case would be highly trained and unbiased. And if you're a black or brown service member who's disproportionately punished under the current system, you would know that the decision maker was impartial, unbiased, and highly trained. This change is something that will help for both victims of sexual assault, but also for defendants' rights. For serious crimes, we need both pieces of this puzzle, and this bill provides both. It will still allow commanders to take the administrative steps to send a message to their troops about what is or is not tolerated. And 97% of them have to do that every day without having convening authority for general court-martial. And it will allow for victims and their families to get real justice. The Military Justice Improvement and Prevention Act will deliver the results that our service members and their families deserve without compromising command authority. That is what our allies have said. UK, Germany, Israel, Australia, Netherlands, Canada have all testified to our body in various hearings and various committees that they saw no diminution in command control and no diminution in the ability to prepare and train troops. The truth is, this is a reform whose time has come, and every minute we delay, we are not standing by our service members. It is a change that has been supported by veterans groups across the country, whether it's the Iraq and Afghanistan Association of Veterans, whether it's the Vietnam Veterans Association, whether it's the Foreign Legion or the Veterans of Foreign Wars. Military veterans support this bill. This is a change whose time has come, and I request that we have a floor vote to decide this. 66 senators on a bipartisan basis support this. The committee has been addressing this issue for 8 years. We've already passed 250 smaller reforms, none of which has had a dent on the problem. It's time to do the reform that survivors have asked for and that veterans organizations support. I ask unanimous consent that at a time to be determined by the majority leader in consultation with the Republican leader, the Senate Armed Services Committee be discharged from further consideration of S-1520 and the Senate proceed to its consideration, that there be 2 hours for debate equally divided in the usual form, and that upon the use or yielding back of that time, the Senate vote on the bill with no intervening action or debate.
Is there objection?
Madam President.
The senator from Rhode Island.
Thank you, Madam President. And let me thank my colleague from New York for her work to move this issue forward. But once again, I would object to the request for the reasons I've previously stated. And in addition, Madam President, today the ranking member of the committee, Senator Inhofe, released the written views of each member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, which he had requested on Senator Gillibrand's proposed legislation. I understand that some in our body might discount these views of senior military leadership, and that's their prerogative. But I do believe it's important that their voices be part of the public discourse. They have dedicated their life to the service of this nation. They have led troops in combat. They have experienced all of the issues that face commanders, face subordinates. They have a unique, I think, position within the system. And in addition, the military will have to implement whatever system Congress devises, and it will require their expertise and skill. As such, I would like to enter these records into the record and ask unanimous consent to do so.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam President. Now, I won't quote from these letters at length now, but I would just point out that the chiefs are open-minded about changing the way we prosecute sexual assault and harassment within the ranks. so am I. In fact, I think that is something that I hope becomes clear in our progress legislatively moving forward. But they nevertheless stress the importance of ensuring that any change Congress enacts must be carefully tailored to address the problems we are trying to solve. And the critical problem we are trying to solve is sexual assault, sexual harassment, any kind of crime connected to sexual misconduct. And in addition, that adequate time and resources must be afforded for implementing any of the changes that we propose. The nature and the magnitude of the change we are contemplating here is complex. We have to make sure we do this right. Further, we've heard over the past few years from the leadership of the Military Services Judge Advocate General's Corps, who have uniformly opposed these changes in nature and scope. And these are the military lawyers, the very military justice experts to whom this bill would invest authority currently reserved to commanders. And I believe we should listen to them as well, move prudently and deliberately to address the problem at hand. So, as I've said a number of times already, I intend to include the administration's recommendations that derive from the President's Independent Review Commission in the markup of the defense bill, subject to amendment, not to move a bill on the floor without the chance of my colleagues in the committee to have their voices heard. These ladies and gentlemen have dedicated themselves to military policy for many years. They are experts in different dimensions of this issue, and they will add, I think, significantly. To simply take a bill and send it to the floor without amendments, I think, is not the way to proceed. I anticipate a bill that will be strengthened through debate and discussion and deliberation by the committee. And with that, Madam President, I would reiterate my objection to Senator Gillibrand's request.
Madam President.
The objection is heard.
Madam President.
Senator from New York.
I disagree with the chairman because the service chiefs and commanders for the last 8 years have objected to any serious reform. And in fact, what they've said time and time again, trust us, we'll get this right, and have objected to any major reform. And in fact, that's what they did any time we tried to reform the military. They objected on the same basis, using the same words, when we tried to repeal Don't Ask, Don't Tell. They objected in the same way when we tried to allow women to get credit for being in combat. They objected in the same way when we integrated the military. And so to hear these objections over and over again, after the committee has studied this issue for 8 years and allowed 250 reforms to be put into the NDAA, all of which were okay by the DOD, just flies in the face of reality. The military has demanded sole responsibility of these cases for the 8 years that I've worked on this issue, and have they dented the problem? No. Sexual assaults were estimated at 20,000 by the military last they counted. Has the rate of cases going to trial increased? No. Has the rate of cases that have ended in conviction increased? No. So under no measurable has the DOD got a handle on this. And for the chairman to say it has to go through the committee, this issue has been going through the committee for 8 years. And in fact, when I've passed bipartisan reform with people like Senator Joni Ernst on the safe to report language, it was taken out in conference by the same DOD staff that didn't want it in there in the first place. So under the chairman's view, this bill could certainly go through committee. We have more than half of the members, but I promise you it will be watered down or taken out in conference because the chairman and the ranking member are against it, and they have the authority to do so. So he is not offering a fair process. The fact that this bill has 66 co-sponsors, how many bills in America in this body have the support of Ted Cruz and Liz Warren, of Mitch McConnell and Senator Schumer? None. This is the kind of bipartisan bill that this country is yearning for, the kind of common sense reform that can protect service members. And while the chairman is so interested in supporting what the generals and the admirals and the top commanders want, why does not he listen to the service members themselves, to the people who have suffered sexual assault, to the people who have suffered racial bias in prosecution? Those are the people that he should be listening to, not the top brass. We've deferred to them the entire 10 years I've been on this committee, and in the entire 10 years, our committee has failed. It is time to bring this bill to the floor. I yield the floor.
The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Baldwin.
Because we know other people named Chip, right?
Madam President.
Senator from Maryland.
Madam President, I ask that the quorum call be suspended.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam President. Just a short time ago, on this Senate floor, we witnessed a low point for this body. We witnessed every Republican senator voting against moving forward to consider legislation to strengthen our democracy. We witnessed all 50 Republican senators voting to block consideration of the For the People Act. I don't know why people are afraid of debating this issue, which is so fundamental to our country at this particular point in time. This bill, the For the People Act, has many important provisions. One of them, of course, is to establish minimum national standards to make sure that every eligible American voter can access the ballot box. That should be something we all want. We should want every American eligible to vote to be out there exercising his or her right to vote, to participate in the decision-making in our democracy. And yet, not a single Republican senator voted to proceed with that debate. Even though this bill is more important now than ever before, because we see, as we speak, Republican state legislators in so many places around our country voting to erect barriers to the ballot box. We see this in state after state, a pure partisan power play to rig the rules, to win elections by subtraction. Not to win elections through the hurly-burly debate over issues of our day, not to win elections by talking about the agenda that somebody is advocating and why someone should vote for a particular candidate. That's the way it's supposed to be. But these are legislatures that are putting up barriers to make it harder for people to access the ballot, and specifically designing these barriers to try to limit participation by people of color and by younger voters. We saw that even before the aftermath of this election. We saw it in the aftermath of the Supreme Court decision in Shelby v. Holder. We saw Texas and North Carolina and other states adopting these kind of restrictive voting laws. Don't have to take my word for it. The U.S. courts took a look at the North Carolina law that was passed a number of years ago and said that they targeted African American voters with, quote, surgical precision to try to keep them from accessing the voting booth. And that's exactly the kind of thing that's going on now in state after state around the country. Trying to win not by the great addition and multiplication of democracy, but by subtraction and by division. And so, why are these states doing this at this moment? They're doing it because of the big lie that was perpetrated in the aftermath of our presidential election. A lie that the former president persists in spewing and repeating to this very moment. The lie that he was somehow cheated or robbed out of an election. The lie that led to the attack on this Capitol on January 6th. It's that lie that is giving rise to these actions in state legislatures. It's that lie that sadly led this body, just a short while ago, to block consideration of a bill to establish a commission to look at what happened on January 6th. That bill, too, was filibustered, just like this one, in order to prevent the American people from getting to the bottom of the big lie. Republican senators blocked that, too. They don't want the country to know. And they apparently are perfectly happy to allow all these state legislatures to put up barriers to voting as part of that big lie narrative. And we know it's a big lie for so many reasons. Of course, President Trump and his campaign took their claims to courts throughout the country. Over 60 courts said those are ridiculous claims. President Trump's own Justice Department, his Attorney General, former Attorney General Barr, before he stepped down, said there was no wrongdoing in this election that would change any kind of outcome. The president's point person at the Department of Homeland Security, responsible for monitoring the integrity of elections, has testified before Congress and said very clearly that the 2020 presidential election was the most secure election in American history. Most secure in American history. That's from the person in charge of election integrity in President Trump's own administration. And so why are all these states enacting these barriers to voting after an election that the Trump Homeland Security Department said was the most secure in history? It's because so many people turned out and voted in that secure election, and they didn't like the outcome. So when you don't like the outcome in election, instead of taking your case to the American people and saying that vote for us next time because here's our agenda for the country, here's what we're going to do, instead they decided that they're going to try to win by putting up barriers to try to prevent those large turnouts, especially among people of color, and we saw younger voters come out in 2020. So the decision to block this bill from debate is just a continuation of protecting the big lie. It's a continuation of protecting the big lie that is being fueled around the country by Donald Trump's continuous fraudulent claims, which unfortunately have seized the Republican Party. We saw what happened in the House of Representatives. Liz Cheney, a stalwart conservative, ousted from her leadership position because she didn't pay homage to the former president. That's what's going on here. That's what's going on in the House, and that is what's reflected in this vote today. The refusal to even debate a bill to strengthen our democracy. Come to the floor. Tell us what you don't like. Tell us what you want to do. Ask, do you really believe that what these state legislatures are doing is a good thing for our democracy? I know it's easier not to have to talk about that. Easier to ignore it all. But we're not going to let this issue go away. We're going to be here week after week to make sure that we continue to push this For the People Act. Now, in addition to the provisions to establish minimal protections so every eligible voter can access the voting booth, the For the People Act also has a number of other very important provisions that are overwhelmingly popular with the American people. One of them is the incorporation of what's known as the Disclose Act. The Disclose Act does a very simple thing. It gets rid of secret corporate money being plowed into our elections through these secret super PACs. You know, what happened after the decision in Citizens United were two things. One, corporate money now could flow in unlimited amounts into elections. But the Supreme Court at the time said, you can at least be aware of who's spending all this money if you pass laws to make sure it's transparent. In fact, a lot of the justices who voted to overturn the Citizens United, voted to allow corporate money in politics, who were the majority in Citizens United, also said in that same opinion that they essentially expected Congress to enact laws to ensure transparency. In fact, 8 of the 9 Supreme Court justices in that case took that position. And yet, the Republican leader who in the early 2000s called for more transparency when it came to money being spent in elections, is taking the opposite idea. We don't want the public to know who is spending all that money. We want it to be secret. I think most of us would agree, and I know the American public agrees, that they have a right to know who is spending millions and millions of dollars to try to influence their votes. We know that because survey after survey shows that Republicans, Democrats, and independents all agree that they should know who is spending all of this dark money. When you see a TV commercial that says, you know, paid for by the Committee for America, you should know who is financing that ad to try to influence your vote. It's a very simple principle. Voters have a right to know. It was a principle agreed to by, conservative jurists like Justice Scalia And yet, the position of the Republican senators today was, we don't even want to talk about that. We don't even want to debate that provision. By the way, that provision, the Disclose Act, passed the House back in 2010. And it came here to the United States Senate. And the Senate version of the Disclose Act was debated on this Senate floor. 59 senators at that time voted to proceed with the bill. You might say 59 senators, that's a majority. Why didn't it pass? Because of the filibuster rule. They needed 60. 59 senators said, we want disclosure. 59 senators said, get rid of secret money. But because of the filibuster rule, it didn't pass. It couldn't get to final passage on a simple majority. If that had passed back in 2010, we wouldn't have our airwaves flooded with secret money today. We would have done what the American people wanted. The Disclose Act is in this bill now. And once again, 11 years later, Republican senators are filibustering the bill for the Disclose Act. They don't want the American people to know who is spending all of that money, mostly corporate money, flowing underground, under the radar screen, through our political system to try to elect candidates of the choice of whatever special interests are spending that money. But they don't want you to know who they are, who's spending all that money to elect people. So why don't we all agree we're going to get rid of secret money? Apparently, we don't even want to debate that. Another provision that is universally popular with the American people is the idea that we should have nationwide, nonpartisan congressional districting. Let's draw congressional districts not based on politics, but based on some nonpartisan criteria. I think we've all heard the line that it should not be the case that politicians are picking the voters. Voters should pick their elected officials. These days, people can draw congressional districts maps with incredible precision with the use of computers and literally try and draw a congressional district designed to get exactly the electorate they want. I don't think that's the way the founders expected it to end up working. Get a computer that could draw these districts with that kind of precision accuracy. And so one of the other important provisions in the For the People Act is let's draw congressional districts so that we, the people, can make these decisions without the lines having been drawn to predetermine the outcome. That's also in this bill. It also has some other important provisions that I support to try to reduce the impact and influence of big money contributors, to allow people with lesser means to be able to contribute to elections and have some element of public financing so that the system is more geared toward the public interest than relying exclusively on the private big contributions. That's another provision that's in the For the People Act. Some people may disagree with that. Come to the floor, debate it, offer an amendment to get rid of it. Let's vote. But what we saw today was a refusal to engage in the democratic process of debate and consideration of a bill. They used this provision, the filibuster provision, to block a bill to help protect and strengthen our democracy. And that is a sad and shameful day in the United States Senate. But I'm going to end with this. This issue is not going away. I was glad to see that even as every Republican senator voted no, every Democratic senator united together to say we stand for the idea that we should have some minimal national standards for access to the ballot booth to protect our democracy, that we should get rid of secret money in politics. Every Democrat said, let's proceed to debate a bill that has those important provisions in it. And so we're not going away. This is a vote that may be a temporary setback, but it's my strong view that at the end of the day, democracy will prevail in the sense that it will be strengthened, and that the American people are not going to stand for a process that reinforces the big lie that was perpetrated on this country. And so the good news, as I said, is every Democratic senator said yes to moving forward, and we will find a way to get this done. We will find a way to protect our democracy. And I yield the floor. Madam President.
Senator from Maryland.
Madam President, I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of S-Res 282, which was submitted earlier today.
The clerk will report.
Senate Resolution 282, recognizing July 1, 2021 as the 100th anniversary of the Government Accountability Office, and so forth.
Without objection, the Senate will proceed.
Madam President, I further ask that the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, and the motions to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate.
Without objection.
Madam President, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of S-2184, introduced earlier today.
The clerk will report.
S-2184, a bill to amend the Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002 to institute a trading prohibition for certain issuers, and so forth, and for other purposes.
Without objection, the Senate will proceed.
I ask unanimous consent that the bill be considered, read a third time and passed, and that the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Without objection.
Madam President, I ask unanimous consent that at a time to be determined by the majority leader following consultation with the Republican leader, the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of calendar number 74 S-1251, that the only amendments in order be the following. Lee number 2119.
Without objection.
I further ask that there be 2 hours for debate equally divided on the bill, that upon the use or yielding back of time, the Senate vote on the Lee amendment, that the bill be considered read a third time, the Senate vote on passage of the bill as amended, if amended, and that the motions to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate.
Without objection.
Madam President, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to executive session to consider the following nomination. Calendar number 115.
Without objection, the clerk will report.
Nomination, Department of Energy, Ali Nouri of the District of Columbia to be an Assistant Secretary, Congressional and Intergovernmental Affairs.
Madam President, I ask consent that the Senate vote on the nomination without intervening action or debate, and if confirmed, the motion be to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table, all without intervening action or debate. That no further motions be in order to the nomination, that any statements related to the nomination be printed in the record, that the President be immediately notified of the Senate's action, and the Senate then resume legislative session.
The question is on the nomination. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes have it. The nomination is confirmed.
Madam President, I ask unanimous consent that when the Senate completes its business today, it adjourn until 2 p.m. Wednesday, June 23rd, that following the prayer and pledge, the morning hour be deemed expired, the journal of proceedings be approved to date, the time for the two leaders be reserved for their use later in the day, and morning business be closed. Further, upon the conclusion of morning business, the Senate proceed to executive session to resume consideration of the Boardman nomination. Further, that if cloture is invoked on the Boardman nomination, all post-cloture time expire at 5:45 p.m. Finally, that if the nomination is confirmed, the motions to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate.
Without objection.
Madam President, if there is no further business to come before the Senate, I ask that it stand adjourned under the previous order.
The Senate stands adjourned until 2 p.m. tomorrow.
motion that is the
got this camera, I was a thing with it. Hi, give me a mic.
Here we are, the podium microphone. Speaking at the podium microphone.
No.
Friends and families and the coalition to salute America's heroes. The primary mission
Yes.
of the coalition.
So whatever you did to get rid of the hum,
Financial
completely
assistance to veterans and their families. Visit saluteheroes.org.
Oh.
There was ever sound, I think. From that's I'm getting from Nick Wood.
But wait, didn't we text those boxes? Remember, you texted with me, and I was getting sound before. I was hitting whatever music you guys were feeding.
All I did was press the crowd to take. There's only so much of what we discover every day that we have time to cover.
Sound, yeah.
This is and the stories behind the headlines.
Let me see.
This isn't our equipment, so I don't know.
No, I know.
Yeah, Channel 1.
Welcome back to this special primary night edition of Inside City Hall. The polls are still open until 9 p.m., so there's time to get out there. Don't watch any further. If you have not voted, just go get it done. There's no doubt that this year's elections are highly consequential, especially considering that our city is just starting to bounce back from the pandemic, with concerns growing over public safety. Joining me now to talk more about the future of New York and what the mayor will have to prioritize. We've got former City Council Speaker and former candidate for Mayor Christine Quinn.
Absolutely, thank you.
Now, you have been very much involved in the discussion, thanks to your job working with homeless families and trying to build a robust way to get them back on their feet and so forth. How do you think the candidates did on that particular issue, now that we're at the end of the campaign?
Well, you know, I'm probably unsatisfiable no matter what they had done, but that said, I'm grateful and gratified that there was discussion of the issue of homelessness, both families and singles. I think there was still, with many of the candidates, too much of a focus on street homelessness in a kind of punitive bringing
Is that something that needs a power supply or a battery? Or?
The biggest discussion of family homelessness we've ever had in a mayoral election and homelessness overall. And so I think that is a step forward, and it's something that whoever wins today, that we'll find out in weeks, we can build off of. We're not starting at zero.
You're a political veteran, so this doesn't come as a surprise to you, but I think for a lot of New Yorkers, it's a surprise that crime and public safety just pushed every other issue aside in just the last few months. 1 year ago, folks were in the streets marching in the wake of the killing of George Floyd, talking about reform, talking about human dignity, talking about the need to change the way we do our policing. The concerns are completely different now. And like I said, you're used to this, but I've been watching this for a while, and I don't remember such an abrupt change in the tone and the tenor of people's concerns.
Do you want to use
and that really did shape this campaign in the end, didn't it?
Or I guess it doesn't matter.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the move away from the concerns about police abuse to concerns about crime is one of the reasons why we're seeing Eric Adams be so far ahead in the polls.
Check. 1 2 1 2. Mic check. Test. Checking. 1 2 3 1 2 3. Test.
Very high rank
Mic
of
check.
tactics. So
1
that
2
really
3 1
has
2 3.
benefited
Test.
him, as opposed to someone like Maya Wiley, who's talked more about crime in a perspective of police abuse, bringing down crime. We bring everybody together. We accomplish both. And I think there's been a rising.
And then, do we tape it? Mic check. 1 2 3 1 2 3. Test. Testing. Mic check. 1 2 1 2. It's good. Do we need to tape it down here, or is it just going to stay like that?
I'll tell you that in a second. Let me just do it.
Okay.
There's definitely going to be like a sign in front.
Yes.
Hello.
Again, sorry, not trying to tell you. I'm just asking questions because it's been a long time since I did this.
I know. It's
I feel rusty. Like all this
Well, I know.
stuff
My
I
guy
forgot.
back at the station's liking it now.
It is.
Oh.
It's okay.
Are
It's
you
good.
hearing the hum right now?
Love it. Love that dream.
I almost
take them out. Was that like perfect time?
People audio people who are doing it here, they're using.
Here just the hum.
You need XLRs?
No, we're bringing some extras.
Oh, I have extras in my car if you need. Not that many, actually, so whatever.
We're just that
Okay, well, he's been involved.
Yeah, so let's get him to see if it's this box. So if you want to use this as your audio input. Yep. All right, listen, leave it like that. Hey, leave it just like that and come here, listen to this.